I want to welcome everybody here. I want to welcome my support staff on here, Carol, Leanne. I'm trying to look to see who else is on here. Sydney and Addie. I don't remember everybody else that's added, but thanks for being here and being supportive. Yay, I figured it out. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is talk about what we're going to learn here. So this is really kind of a high-level overview of what are your educational resources. We're going to talk about how to read the data and the software specs. We're going to talk a little bit about the PROC ID chart. I'm not going to go in great detail, but at least show you how to sort of read it. It is difficult to read. And we're going to identify resources within the National Harvest Report and on the IQVIA site too. Although I'm not going to get too involved in that because they have some wonderful educational videos out there for you. But I will point out a few important good resource areas in their sites. Okay, so let the games begin. Can't Congress see that we have data collection under control? And so I know some days it feels like this. And before I always tell this story before I start this session. So I've been a data manager since 2004 or 5, something like that, a long time ago. And when I first took my job, they said, oh, you have cardiac experience. This is great. You can do this database. And there was a stack of data collection sheets about knee high on the floor. And they said, all you have to do is get these entered into the database in 6 months. And I thought, well, I could probably get all those forms entered in 6 months. That's not going to be a big deal. And then I started looking at the forms, and the only thing that was on the form was the patient's name, the medical record number, and the date of surgery. I really had a problem in. I didn't know anything about data definitions. I knew nothing about a training manual. I knew nothing. I just kind of winged it. Did get all the stuff in, but really learned the hard way. So I'm hoping that this session will help those of you who may have the same experience that I have, learn where the resources are, so at least you are familiar with the resources that are available to you, because I honestly didn't have. I knew nothing. And it was quite a struggle for the first year or so. So we're going to point out the resources on the STS website, the webinars that we have monthly. We have a mentorship program, talk a little bit about that. We have the Advances in Quality Outcomes Conference, which is right around the corner. It's going to be October the 14th is the adult day this year. We have the database newsletter, and we have regional groups to talk about a little bit. So I'm going to kind of run through these slides, and then I'm going to switch hopefully to the website just to kind of show you in real time what it's like. But the first resource I think is the sts.org site. When you go on, you'll see that you can go right into the national database. And when you pull that up, you're going to see adult, general, congenital, and interacts. Those are the specific different types of databases that we have inside the national database. But on that first page, if you just kind of scroll down, you're going to see a site for live webinars. And I'll actually show you that. And if you scroll down a little further, you're going to see some really important resources. There's data manager education, there's harvest information, there's database forms, the database national news, there's contact information. So all of this is extremely important and helpful information. I will go over it again. I want to just point out the data manager education. Again, there's some great videos on there. I've got the dashboard review. We have data manager survey results, so you can kind of see. I like to look at those because it kind of gives you an idea of what other data managers around the country are doing and their responsibilities and what else they do besides just doing STS. And we've got some really good how-to videos from IQVIA about uploader, DQR review. We also have some anatomical diagrams out there. So to assist you in abstracting difficult cases or just learning anatomy, if you know, a review of anatomy. Talk a little bit about the mentor program. This program is up and running. However, I know that there's been a shortage of mentors. So for all those old data managers on this call who want to be a mentor, please, and I think it's Addie right now, Carol, right? Let Addie know.
Yep, Addie Dolan is managing the mentorship program, and I'll put her email in the chat box.
Right, that would be great. So for those older data managers on this call, if you want to be a mentor, we have a lot of slots for that because we have a lot of new people who want mentors, but kind of a backlog on that. Okay, AQO, just to tell you what it is, I'm sure you've heard of it. If you're really new, you may have never even heard of it. It is our data manager conference that we have once a year. It's usually in October, end of September, early October. I should have changed this slide. This is last year's meeting. This year's meeting starts October the 13th and goes through the 15th, and the 14th is the adult cardiac day. So a whole day of adult cardiac presentations. It's going to be a great presentation. It is free for database participants this year. So if you haven't registered, please do so. When we go over the website, I'll show you where that is. It's a great learning opportunity. So
I'll put the link in the chat box, Melinda.
That would be good. I want to talk a little bit about the database newsletter. This is also available on the website. It's an electronic newsletter that comes out about 6 times a year. It's sent via email, but you can also find it on the website, and I'll show you where. It has information about public reporting, data submission deadlines, meetings, audits, etc., things like that. It's kind of a nice little newsletter that comes out to keep you up to date about what's going on. And then we have regional groups, and I will go into more detail about the regional groups. Just so you know, pretty much each region in the United States, I think now has a group leader. I think there's only one that is vacant now, and they're working on filling that. But you can actually, if you're new, you can actually join a regional group that some meet monthly. They have webinar calls, some have newsletters, some have in-person or virtual conferences. It just kind of depends on the structure of the regional group. You can join the regional group. It's a great networking opportunity. It's also a great way to collaborate with other data managers. A lot of regional groups have email trains where you can send in a question, and then other people in the group will answer the question. So it's a good source of support, and I think it's extremely helpful, especially to new data managers, so that they can establish some contacts out there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to go, we're going to go into the real website and kind of look at all this in real time. Okay, so bear with me.
Oh, you got this, Melinda. There's no doubt in my mind.
I don't know if I got this or not. Let's see.
Yeah, I posted a link in the chat box also to the regional group info on the pages if anybody's interested in learning more.
So are you guys seeing the home page for STS?
Yes, ma'am. It's little, but it's like.
Yay. It is there? You see it?
I see it.
Oh, I did it. Very good. I guess you can teach an old girl some new tricks sometimes.
You did a great job.
Okay, so anyway, so when you type in sts.org in your search engine, this is what comes up right now. And to me, sometimes it doesn't always look this way. They change it a lot, I think. And I like it because you get to look at new pictures. But if you go right into this STS national database, you're going to see this looks much like the slide I had up. But I'll just kind of walk you through it. So as you can see, there's online learning, talks about meetings and things of that nature. More meetings over here, calendar of events. We have our quality and safety. So these are your performance measurements. And I'll just go into that really quickly just to show you. This is your National Quality Forum measures. So you can find them here. You can see what they are. And this is, of course, adult cardiac, but if you keep scrolling, you'll get down to the thoracic and congenital too. So if I go back and then over here we have registries, which we're going to get into in just a second. I just kind of want to go over this. The Research Center for the STS is here. We have some advocacy and publications and some resources. This is the risk calculator, which we pointed out on the call. Carol pointed out on the call yesterday. It's under resources. There's also some clinical practice guidelines here, consensus statements. So really, this is a really good, there's a really lot of tools here just in of itself before we even get to the database. So now we're going to get back into the database and get to the specific stuff. And as I was saying, if you just scroll down on this, I'll call it the main page. Here's your webinars. So if you look here, you can actually go into view webinars and it will tell you, that the new data manager webinar is going on right now, and here's how you join it. It also tells you that here's the next monthly webinar for adult, and here's the next user group. The other feature I like about this is that you can, you can actually get into past webinars. So you can see that if you missed a webinar, I can just go and listen to it at another time. So the past webinars are here too. So that's really helpful in case you miss it, or in case you were there, but you want to hear something again. So that's really nice, I think, to have that. So then, if we just keep scrolling down, we're going to talk about the FAQ here in a minute, but here's where you send your FAQ questions in. Ask a question. These are clinical questions. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So here's your resources down here. So this is your IQVIA Go Live checklist. You've got data manager education. You've got harvest schedule and information. So you know when to send your submissions, you know when they're due. We'll look at that in just a second. Database forms. Here's all about the meeting, AQO. Here's your national database news. Contact information. This is important. It gives you all the good contact information of anybody you need. Starts with IQVIA. If you've got a technical question for them, it gives you the email and the phone number to contact them. If you have questions concerning the national database, such as harvest schedules or participation agreements, here's the person you contact, stsdb@sts.org. If you have clinical questions, you'll click on here and it'll click you back to the FAQ button. So this is important to know where the contacts are. Alrighty then. So just so you know where your resources are, I think that's really important. Again, I'll click into this data manager education. It's much like the slide, but you've got different types of education here. Look, here's AQO Online. That's from last year. So that's wonderful that you have it. All the presentations that were done last year. Some really good learning every year we have good learning. And then we have how-to videos down here. And we have, like I said, diagrams that help you. So now I'm going to try to go back to my slides. Oh, the regional groups. I'm just going to show you that. Here we go, regional database activities. So there's 20 regional groups. You can see how it's laid out here. Pretty much everybody, every place is represented. There's a picture of the regional group people from last time. It was in 2019, I guess we met in person. And there'll be a roster here that should give you contact information for all of these people. So who are the regional leaders? So for example, in the Central Southeast region, Sandra Richardson and Keisha Medley, and it gives you their phone numbers and their emails. So if you're in the Southwest region and you're new and you want to join a regional group, this is who you contact. Oh, row. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my slides. I'm going to try to get back to my slides. Okay.
You're doing great navigating, Melinda.
Oh, well, you know, this is a challenge, but
yeah,
I haven't been up long, so my brain is still fresh, see? Okay.
I think you're doing great.
For those of you who don't know, I am on Pacific time. So for all of those people who say, gosh, you answer questions really late in the day, when I answer the email, my FAQ questions, they think I work really late. No, it's just because I live in a place that is on Pacific time. All right, so now we're going to talk about, oh my gosh, I didn't mean for this to happen. I'm getting kind of crazy here. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about, I'll get back to the other slide. Here, asking a clinical question. Okay, so I pointed this out to you on the website. So now I'm going to talk about the question because when you ask a question, you get a form that comes up like this. So I'll tell you that this looks like a lot of information to fill out, but it is important. We do need a name and we need an email, and I need a phone number too. I'm the person who manages the adult mailbox. We have Ruth, who is now managing thoracic mailbox, and Chastity, who is managing the congenital mailbox. The phone number is important because sometimes by accident, you might type in the wrong email. And so I try to send you an answer and it keeps coming back to me, and you've never sent me a question before, so I can't go and look your email up. And you think I just never answered your question. So please put your phone number in because sometimes that happens, and sometimes I do have to call you if I can't contact you any other way. Participant ID, the version is real important. I need to know what version you're asking this question out of because answers may be different. Like if you're asking me a version 2.9 question, and I'm in the 4.2 training manual, well, the answer may be slightly different. So it's important to put the version down and the state where you're at, because I like to know where you're at. But also, if I have to call you, I want to see what state you're in. So I kind of get an idea when the best time to call you is based on your time zone. The sequence number is really important because, oh man, this thing is tricky. The sequence number is important because you'll ask me a question and I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm not quite sure. So the sequence number always points me to the right direction so that I know, hey, they're asking me about this sequence number for this specific question. All right. FAQ turnaround, I'll just tell you, when you send me a question, usually somewhere between 5 and 10 days, you'll get an answer. Unless I have to take it to surgeon or STS leadership, which then could take up to 30 days. And I usually tell you, I'm going to take this and move this up. This may take a little longer. I just had somebody send me an FAQ today that said, hey, you never answered this question. It's from July. Well, it probably because it didn't make it to my mailbox, or somehow it got lost, or I don't know. But if you don't hear from me in 10 days, send me another question, because maybe it didn't get to me. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe a little gremlin stole it. But send me another question, because usually the turnaround's pretty good these days. All right. So now we're going to talk about getting actually into the database part. So we're going to go into the adult cardiac section. And you can see once you click into that, you're going to have an area that says Access Data Collection Resources. When you get to these resources, and I'll show you this once I get through this part, it's going to first come up and show you the training manual and the FAQ summary. Now, the training manual is updated once a month. The updates usually come out the first week. So like the next update will be coming out the first week of October. We have an FAQ summary that's running, and you can see all the FAQs that are updated on a monthly basis. Further into this, well, let me just go over there. I'll just do it. It'll be easier. I think it'll be easier. Are you seeing me go to sts.org, Carol?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So if you go into the adult cardiac, and then we're going to talk about all this stuff, but if you go into it, here's your data collection resources, and here's your version. So you go into the right version. Okay. So make sure you're in the right version. If you're backlogged and you're still in 2.9, you want to be down here in 2.9 and not in 4.2. But most people are in 4.2. So you see the training manual, FAQ, you see your data collection forms, you see surgeon worksheets, you see additional resources such as the data specifications, which we're going to talk about more, software specifications, we're going to talk about that more, the PROC ID chart, we're going to talk about that a lot more, risk variable chart, case inclusion guide, NQF measures. So lots and lots of really good information in this particular part of the database. So let's talk about the data collection forms. So you'll see that there's two types. There is a non-annotated data collection form, and then there's an oh, you can't see it?
No, we can see the sts.org.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just when I thought I was getting good at this.
Yeah, it's humbling, isn't it?
I know. Can you see it now?
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So we have the non-annotated data collection form. That basically means no sequence numbers, right? And then we have the annotated data collection form, which is the data collection form with sequence numbers. That's the one I love. It has the sequence numbers, plus it has the short names. I always use this one. To me, it's more useful, but you can choose to use which one you like. But I like having my sequence numbers and my short names and the long names all in one place. So this is an example of the training manual, so they can kind of go over this for you. So this is sequence 305. You're going to see there's a long name. There's a short name. There's a definition. And then there's an intent clarification. So when we make the training manual, we have the definition made, but sometimes we have to provide clarity to the definition. We can't go in and change the definition. So that intent clarification is really important for us to add updates or clarifications to the existing data definition. So what I'm saying is, don't just read the data definition. Make sure you read the intent clarification too, because you're going to find important information in that intent clarification, because that's where we're going to add little things to the data definition that we can't just go and change in the data definition. For example, you'll see this one, there's an update here, April 2021. In the event of multiple admit dates in the medical record, use the date that the patient first becomes an inpatient. So it's very clear. And you'll see it's in green. So we kind of have color coding for the training manual too. Brand new stuff is in a really nice red that Carol loves. And actually,
I'm laughing over here at myself. Melinda and I got in a disagreement. I think it was our first disagreement about the color red to use in the training manual. Sorry.
So I've actually grown to love that color red. So thank you for coercing me into that color red. So we have this really nice color red. That's for brand new stuff. And then I have this nice color green. So green is for stuff that, like important updates that I don't want you to miss. So I keep it in green. And then you can see there's an FAQ below it, which was, when it first came out, was red. So September 2020, it was red. But the very next month, I keep the FAQ bolded, but the rest goes into black. And so this is how the training manual is set up. And it's a very useful document. I use it every day. Okay. So I kind of already showed you these things here in just navigating this website. I'm going to kind of just run through some of this really quick and add a few just little comments about it as we go. So the first thing I want to talk about is this software specification. So if you see here, you see software specifications. So we're going to get into that just a little deep. First of all, it's a long document, and I probably didn't read the thing for 5 years, honestly, I'll be honest. Because first, remember, I knew nothing. I was oblivious, just flying by the seat of my pants, and I didn't know all about all these resources. So, I'm going to try to point out specific information in parts of this specification that you might find extremely helpful. So on page 4, this shows you the dates of the versions. So let's say, for example, you get hired and they're like, oh, we need to go enter 2.81 cases. So you're going to know by looking at page 4 of the software specifications that that is cases from July the 1st, 2014 through June the 30th, 2017. So this is to me, this is a really great resource to be aware of, especially if you're in a backlog situation. Okay, page 6 is important because it tells you how to read the data specs. So if you look there, you'll see integer is a numeric value with no decimal point. And real is a numeric value with at least 1 decimal point. So this is important information to know, because when you get into the data specs, you're going to see why you need to know what an integer is versus a real number. On page 11 of the software specs, we have the record ID, which is a unique numeric value that identifies the record in the database. This is a number generated by STS, and it sort of starts like with a V01, for example, V01000. It kind of looks like that. It's not something that you can change. It follows this record throughout eternity. I should say this is the record ID, the unique number for that record in the particular database. Page 14 points out what can be imported into the vendor data form. Okay, and so most Most everybody, I think, from vendor standpoint, probably uses some sort of ADT tool, which is like an admission discharge tool where they can import the patient's medical record number and the date of birth and name and address and things like that. But this will give you a list of things that can be imported. This is page 14. The list is not very long. And the reason being is because it's real important to have the data manager's eyes on the data. There's also some limits with informatics, writing the code correctly, changes in definitions, and then you have different EMR versions and vendors. So there's not a lot of stuff that can be imported in, but there are some things, and the page 14 will show you what those things are. Page 16 on the software specs talks about parent-child relationships. So if you're new to databases and you're not familiar what parent means and what child means, this will tell you what that means. And when you get to reading your data specs, you'll also need to know, oh, this is the parent, this is the child. Okay, so you can see that in your data specs too, and I'll point that out as we're going through. Page 26 talks about MELD score calculation, which is a system calculation. But if you're looking at your data collection form and you don't have a MELD score, you're like, oh, why is this not calculating? Well, this software spec will tell you, you got to have an INR, you have to have total billing, and you have to have a creatinine to calculate the MELD score. So this is a nice resource to be familiar with too. So if you don't have an INR, you're not going to have a MELD score. Page 27 talks about the calculation of vent hours. So that's an important resource to know where that is. It's on page 27. As I said, there's lots of really good information in the software specs. It's just a long document and it can be cumbersome to read. On page 29, this is the field short name and sequence number by data version. And so, as you can see, antibiotic discontinuation, which is a short name, the first one up there, in version 2.61, the sequence number was 1347, but now in version 4.2, it's 2290. So as you can see, sequence numbers change throughout versions. Short names don't. And this will give you an idea. And sometimes they don't change, but sometimes they do. So this is a nice resource to be familiar with. All right. So now we're getting into the data specifications, which is the other document that's right there under the resources for the adult cardiac database. So the data specifications are basically the specifications for a specific field, so or the whole database. So we're just going to take this one right here, renal failure dialysis, sequence 375. So I'm just going to kind of dissect it a little bit. So you got your long name, you have your short name, which is dialysis. You have your section name, which is risk factor. So you know it's in the risk factor section. You have your sequence number, 375. Yes, this is a core, and yes, this is harvested. You have your definition, and you have your format. Now that says text. So this little thing in the blue box here is from the software specs. So a text format is a value that can contain, oh shoot, did you see my batteries? You know what, I don't know what's going on here, Carol.
No, I didn't see anything.
It says my computer battery's running low, and for the life of me, hold on, I'm gonna unplug it and put it in someplace else.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. So while Melinda's managing her battery.
Yes, I got it.
There you go.
Jeez, that was scary.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have a mid-webinar song planned.
Well, that's funny because I think my anyway, I'm sorry about that, but I think my one of my battery strips must have went out because it was plugged in. So I'm back. Sorry, apologize for that, guys. Okay, so sequence 375. So we go down here. Oh, I was talking about the format. So this is a text format. So the software specs tell me that a text format is a value that can contain any alpha or numeric characters. Okay. And then we have our harvest code. So 1 means yes, 2 means no, and 3 is unknown. So that's kind of interesting. We're going to further get down into this. As you can see, this is talking about diabetes, yes or no. And then you have the control. So for this, the long name is diabetes control. The short name here is your short name, here's your sequence number. And if you look down here, it's telling you the parent short name. So diabetes control is a child to the parent diabetes. So that'll give you some idea of parent-child relationships. You can find out what the parent field is in your data specs also. The other thing that's really important in the data specs is the low values, the high values, the usual ranges, and the usual high range. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So this is height. This is sequence 330. The low value for height is 20 centimeters. The high value is 251. So what does that mean? Well, that means if you have somebody taller than 251 centimeters, that you're only going to be able to enter in 251 centimeters into the database. Because the high value is 251, it won't let you enter anything in above 251. And it's the same concept for the low value. If you have somebody that's 19 centimeters tall, which I can't even imagine, and you try to enter that in, it's not going to let you enter that in. It's going to say this is an illegal activity or unacceptable error or something. It depends on what how your vendor flags it. Then you can only enter the low value of 20. So that's the low value and the high value. Now the usual range and the usual high range. Okay. So this is a little different. So the usual low range is 122 and the usual high range is 213. So what does that mean? Well, that means if you have somebody that's 214 centimeters and you put that in the database, then you're going to get this little pop-up warning that says, hey, this is out of the usual range. Are you sure you want to enter this? And you just check your data and you enter 214, which is how tall the patient is, and you say, yes, I want to put that in. Okay, so the usual low range and the usual high range are just kind of like, they're like warnings. You can kind of, I say, kind of ignore them in a way, check your data, make sure you entered it correctly, but then go on with your business. The low value and the high value is totally different. I mean, if you're trying to enter 260 centimeters, the database is going to say, you cannot enter this. This is illegal. It won't let you do it. It's kind of a hard stop. So you're going to have to enter 251 as the max because that's all it's going to let you enter in there. All right. So that's the data specs. It's a long document, and I know this is a quick review, but we have a lot to talk about. But that at least gives you some idea of how to read the data specification manual. So now I want to talk a little bit about the PROC ID chart. The PROC ID chart is the chart that determines whether your case stays isolated or not. And what does that mean? For those of you who are new, what that means is that if you are doing a cabbage, and then you also are having a carotid endarterectomy done at the same time in the same room, this PROC ID chart will say, hey, that carotid's gonna be on the PROC ID chart, and it's gonna tell you, guess what? This is not gonna be a cabbage anymore because that carotid is gonna add risk. And so this will not stay as just a cabbage, an isolated cabbage. That's the term we use, isolated. It's gonna be a cab plus other when it gets analyzed. So we have these procedures here: isolated coronary artery bypass, isolated AVR, isolated MVR, aortic valve replacement plus cab, mitral valve replacement plus cab, aortic valve replacement plus mitral valve replacement, isolated mitral valve repair, and the mitral valve repair plus the cab. These are your analyzed cases. So these are the ones that are going to be on the PROC ID chart, and these are the ones that will be affected when other procedures are added. So if you're doing other procedures with an isolated cab, the other procedure that you do may or may not keep that cabbage isolated or analyzed. Okay, so now we're going to kind of go through this chart. And it is difficult. This is a busy chart. Took me years to figure out how to read this thing. So this is what it looks like. And you'll see that you have the variable short names. So you've got 4 categories up here at the top. You got your cab, which is PROC ID 1, and you've got your AVR, isolated PROC ID 2, and then you've got your MVR, PROC 3, and your AVR and cab. And so this is kind of a scroll down, and I'll show you once I'll take you back to the website after I get through talking this, so you'll get an idea, but it's kind of a scroll down chart. And so if you are interested in, you're doing isolated cab and you're interested in how a procedure affects it, you got to kind of just scroll down through about 4 pages to find the answer to that. Okay, so,
This is Carol. Sorry for interrupting. I'm going to post a webinar from April 1st of last year that goes through how to read this chart.
Yes, I think I have that link in this presentation, but please do post that. That would be very helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Because this is just a brief overview, guys, just to kind of give you an idea. So these gray lines here, that's like computer lingo. Just ignore it. You don't have to know what's in those gray lines. The only gray line that's important is that top one that tells you the variable name and what procedure you're looking at. So on this slide, you're going to see, for example, you have procedures that affect all 4 categories. So if you look at the endovascular procedure 5066, it's going to affect every category. So your cab, your AVR, your MVR, and cab AVR. And then below, you'll see that there are other procedures that affect each category a little differently. So if you see like sequence 4191, it's AFib lesion location. It's used in the isolated cab. It's used in the isolated AVR. It's used in the isolated cab AVR. But you notice in column number 3, which is the isolated MVR, that sequence 4191 is not even used. Okay, so it's not even used. That's not even used in that calculation. You'll also see that there's some green highlights on this Proc ID chart. And those are changes from version 2.9 to 4.2. So other cardiac tumor sequence 4115. So let's say you're doing a cabbage, but there's also a cardiac tumor that you're taking out. And that's sequence 4115. So what I do in the Proc ID chart is first I put in sequence 4. I just hit my control F and search for sequence 4115. And then it'll focus it down for me. Or you can just scroll down to the cab all the way down and see if 4115 is there. So you can see on this slide that 4115 is on the Proc ID chart. If you code no or missing, it's going to stay in the isolated case. So that's what that means, no or missing. So if you code no, it stays isolated. So there was no tumor. Or if you don't answer the question, it's going to stay isolated. And we have the webinar, which Carol posted, and it's on here too. It goes way more into detail in this. This just kind of gives you an idea of sort of how to read it and interpret it. We'll do just a little scenario here. So I went ahead and put the headings here because that's one thing that I know that data managers complain about because I hear about it, but the headings don't go down on every page. And I know that would be more helpful. And I think Carol was investigating that last I heard. I'm not sure. Carol, do you have any update on that?
What was the question?
So how the headings don't go down on all 4 pages of the Proc ID chart. Are there any plans so that those headings can come down on each page?
Yeah, I think I only had a PDF. I think the reason is that I only had a PDF of it. This chart originated at DCRI, which is Duke Clinical Research Institute, who is currently our analytics center. And they provided this back to me in PDF format. So I don't think I was able to make changes to it.
Okay, gotcha. All right, thanks for that update.
Yeah.
So what I did on this particular slide is I just put it here so you can see. So we're looking at a patient, it's a CAB patient that had AFib pulmonary vein isolation performed in sequence 4191. So will this procedure be classified as an isolated CAB? So if we look on our Proc ID chart, under CAB, it says epicardial. So that means if I code epicardial to 4191, it's going to stay isolated. Or if I code none, or if it's missing. So all 3 of those things stay isolated. So this is a pulmonary vein isolation, which I know is an epicardial procedure. It's not an intracardiac. So my patient that's having a pulmonary vein isolation with his CABG is still going to be an isolated CABG. So that just kind of gives you an idea, kind of sort of how to read it. I'm going to go over to the website just to show you what it looks like, dynamic like. Let's see. Everybody seeing that now, the website? Okay. So this is the Proc ID chart. And you can see how it just kind of flows down, right? And you can see that those headings don't carry over. And then after about 6 pages, you'll find the other Proc IDs, number 5, number 6, number 7, and number 8. And it flows the same way, and it's the same way of reading it as we just discussed. So hopefully this is a little helpful for you and helping you understand how to read it, because it can be challenging to read. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the risk model variable chart. This is important because it shows you what factors are in each of the risk models. And as you know, risk adjustment allows the STS participants to compare their performance with other participants by accounting for and controlling risk factors, so that you're trying to level the playing field as best as possible prior, based on the risk of the patient. So this is what it looks like. And I'm just going to point out a couple of things. So this is the risk variable for cabbage. You can see up here in the top. And we're going to look at operative mortality. Now, I want to point this out because I'm not sure that people really know this, but primary payer and secondary payer are in the risk model. So I've seen sites before that just don't fill out their insurance information. And that's why I want to point this out. Your insurance information is part of the risk model. So please complete those fields. The other thing I want to point out is that alcohol is in the risk model. So it's important that you get that answered. Also, NYHA class is in the risk model. And now, you know, for version 4.2, that's a parent field. So it's important that it gets documented because it is in the risk model. Valvular insufficiency, aortic, mitral, and tricuspid insufficiency are all in the risk model. I point that out because I've seen sites who just don't even fill out their echo information. So this is it's an interesting.
Hey, Melinda. Would you mind starting the slideshow so it's a little bit bigger for everybody?
Oh, I thought I did. Am I not?
No, I'm just seeing this, like the slides on the side and then the slide in the middle.
Oh, good Lord. Okay. Where did it go?
It was, and then I think something happened.
Huh. Okay, because I'm still seeing a slideshow. Hold on. Let me see if I can find where it is. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Oh, geez. Sorry, guys. You should have mentioned that earlier.
Oh, there you go. Wow. Yeah, that's fancy.
Yeah, I think I must have started the wrong one. Sorry. Okay. Do you guys need me to go back over this part, or are we okay? This is the risk variable chart. So it's important to know what's in your risk variable chart.
Yeah,
And
I
so
saw it okay. It was just a little small.
Okay. So I'm just pointing out a few things that you may not have known were in there. The other thing that's important, and I'll point out here, is mechanical cardiac assist devices. So balloon pump WIN, catheter-based WIN, ECMO WIN. So the WIN is important, and I'll bring this out. If you have a pre-op one, let's say you have a pre-op balloon pump and you have a post-op balloon pump, always code the pre-op, because that's the WIN. That's going to add your risk to the risk adjustment going into surgery. And the same is for catheter assist device. If you got one post and one pre, I always get the pre. Or if you have one post and intra, get the intra. Okay, so, and that's in the training manual, but I did want to point that out to people. ECMO is in the risk model. I get a lot of questions in the mailbox about, well, my patient has ECMO going into surgery, does that exclude him from isolation? Does that affect case isolation? It doesn't affect case isolation. What it does affect is the risk adjustment, and it is weighted heavily in the risk adjustment. So that's where you capture the ECMO. And that's why we also, in the training manual, let you capture people who are on ECMO going into the OR as emergent salvage and resuscitation cases, because we know how sick those patients are. And it doesn't affect isolation, but it certainly weighs into the risk model. Okay, so some other additional resources. We have a congenital diagnosis and procedure list, which is, I think, very helpful when I have to enter a congenital procedure. And the way I search it, you know, let's say the doctor says he did a, he did say he did an ASD and a particular type of ASD in the op note. I'll just take that and I'll do my control F, so I search the document and find out where it is in this document, because the document can be overwhelming, especially if you're not used to doing congenital procedures. So that's, in my opinion, that's the best way to find stuff in this document, is to use your control F and search for what you're looking for. It's a great resource, especially when you have to fill out sequence 6500 and you're not quite sure what to put in there. Another resource that you have is the case inclusion guide. I developed this, Carol and I developed this last year, I guess, in an effort to assist people in knowing what to put into the database. It's not an all-inclusive list, but I think it's a pretty good list to give you an idea of the kind of cases that need to go into the database. I'm going to show it dynamic so you can see, so we can kind of go through it a little bit. So I'm going to try to share again. Here we go.
I have confidence in you, Melinda.
So that's the PROC ID. So we come out here. Are you seeing it now?
Yes, ma'am. I see your mouse hovered over the case inclusion guide. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so here it is. And again, it starts with the required cases. Okay, so your CABs, your valves, your aorta procedures above the diaphragm, yes, your T-bars, and your procedures performed on the heart, the aorta, and the great vessels, which are the pulmonary arteries, inferior superior vena caves. It has a little note here about a standalone pericardectomy. Just know that you can put those in if it's from the left phrenic nerve to the right phrenic nerve. Otherwise, it needs to go to general thoracic. It talks about AFib cases are required if done by a cardiothoracic surgeon. ICD and lead extractions done by a cardiothoracic surgeon. VADs in conjunction with CV surgery. So that's not a standalone VAD. That's a VAD that's done with like a cabbage. And then we have optional cases. So optional cases, what does that mean? Well, that means that if your surgeon wants these cases put in, you can put them in. Those are cases like a standalone ECMO, meaning that's the only thing you're doing is putting in ECMO, or standalone Impella, or a standalone VAD, because the VAD, they have their own database. ECMO has its own database. TAVRs, MAVRs, and mitral clips, those should really go into the NCDR registry, but you can put them in here if you want. So heart transplants, they really should go into the UNOS registry. They're not required to be put in here unless your surgeon wants them. So this is kind of a good guideline to help you to know what cases go where. All right. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to try to All right. Okay. Oops. See?
I see your
Okay,
slide.
so you can see it. So another really good resource under the same, under version 4.2 documents is the National Quality Forum Measures. And basically, you know, this is the process measures, the outcome measures. For example, pre-op beta blocker use of your IMA, discharge antiplatelets, and then outcome measures like renal failure and surgical reexploration. So it's included as a resource, and it's a wonderful resource. But I want to show you how to read it a little bit. So for example, if you look at this, you've got beta blocker at discharge. And it tells you the description. So this is the percentage of patients aged 18 years and older undergoing an isolated CAB. Okay, so this is just for isolated CAB patients. And then it's got the numerator. These are the people who isolated CABs who were discharged on a beta blocker. And then your denominator, all isolated CABs. So again, you can see this is just for isolated CABs, as is the anti-lipid. So it's just for isolated CABs. So then I like to look at the exclusion part because this is important. So if you look at this beta blocker, it says cases are removed from the denominator if there was an in-hospital mortality or if the beta blocker at discharge was contraindicated. So it's really important to not only read the description and who is in the metric, but also what are the exclusions for the metric. Surgeon worksheets are additional resources. And we have surgeon worksheets for almost everything, it seems like these days, the major procedures that we do. And they're very useful. They're actually, they're Word documents of those too, so you can change them to suit your facility's needs, if so be. All right, I'm gonna have a sip of water here just for a second. Sorry.
A lot of talking, isn't it?
A lot of talking.
Yeah.
So I wonder if, okay, so right now we're going to get into, we're going to start talking about the National Report Analysis Overview, which you find on the IQVIA website, and I'll show you that eventually, but I want to talk a little bit about this report. This report, in my mind, is sort of like the old Harvest summary report that we used to get, and it has a lot of good information in it. It's got an overview, it's got what the reporting levels are, what your region is, an overview of risk-adjusted results, model endpoints, how missing data is handled, OE ratio, star ratings, and NQF measures. So it's a really good report, and you'll find a lot of information in the report. What I'm going to do is kind of point out some of the important things that are in this report, and then I'll show you where to find it. It's in the library in IQVIA. And we'll go at some point, we're going to go to IQVIA and just kind of navigate through that a little bit so you'll see it. But this is a great resource. Okay, so again, I said I'm just going to point out a few important things in this report. There's a lot of really good stuff, but some of this stuff I think is important to point out. So it's important to understand how missing data values are handled when the STS risk adjustment models are applied to patients with incomplete data. Age is the only required variable for all models. So if you don't have an age in your patient's database form, then you won't get a risk model calculation. So that's the only required variable. The other variables, categorical variables, are missing data are generally assumed to have the lowest risk category. So, for example, if diabetes was not coded, it would assume to be no. Okay. In this review, this overview, it talks about how ejection fraction, missing ejection fraction, is handled. And so right now, if the EF is missing or less than 10%, then you're going to have your EF set for males at 55, for females at 58. So there was a lot of discussion amongst STS leadership and data managers who were really concerned about this because, you know, their patient had an EF of 8. And that was the real EF. And they were very concerned that the risk model was going to set their patient's EF at 55%. So in June of this year, we updated the training manual to say in the risk model, EF values that are less than 10% get imputed to 40. If your patient has an EF value less than 10%, enter the EF as 10% in the database. So that's the lowest EF you can enter, and it will be imputed to the risk model as 10. So there's a complete chart in this analysis overview, somewhere around page 16 or 17, that talks about how certain variables that are missing get imputed into the risk model. This is to me is the most real significant one. So I wanted to point that out to you. This is actually, I took some screenshots from IQVIA because my old slides were old. They were showing things that looked a little different. So this is kind of how I'm going to talk a little bit about OE ratio and odds ratio. And this is a mortality risk adjustment report that you'll see in IQVIA. And you can see that it's in-hospital mortality is presented to you in odds ratio and OE ratio. There's also a risk adjusted rate. And then you'll see that there's my site for 2019, what your rate was for 2020, 21, and there's a like group. Now in your analysis overview, it's going to tell you what like group means. And generally speaking, that's hospitals that are like your hospital, same size, things of that nature. And then you have a region. So what hospitals in my region, and that analysis overview will tell you who's in your region, so who you're being compared to. And it'll also tell you the STS rate. So the OE ratio, the benefit of OE ratios is that they're very familiar to many surgeons and they're simple to compute, okay? The odds ratio is obtained from models, and they provide a more reliable estimate, okay, for patients with a small number of, for hospitals with a small number of patients. So that's why both are presented. Now, I'm going to give you the down and dirty, easy way to interpret this. So if your OE ratio or your odds ratio, either one, is greater than 1, then your patient is, then you're not performing, you're performing worse than expected. That's what I want to say. So if you're doing something that's greater than 1, it's worse than expected. If it's your OE ratio is less than 1, then you're performing better than expected. If your OE ratio is 1, then your average. So if we go back to this slide and we look up here, in hospital mortality, the OE ratio is 0.3. That's pretty darn good. Wow. So that's way under 1. So these people are doing great with mortality. They're having low mortality rates. Okay. You can see the STS rate is always 1. That's going to be the average. So that's just that's my down and dirty OE ratios. So if you're over 1, you're doing worse. If you're less than 1, you're doing better. So when you're reading your reports and you're scrolling down through, I look to see what my ratios are. And the ones over 1, those are the ones I'm going to focus improvement projects on. The risk adjustment, understanding the risk adjusted rate, it's essentially the same. If your risk adjusted rate is greater than the STS average, then your outcomes were worse, basically. And if your risk adjusted rate is less, then your outcomes are better. And your risk adjusted is equal, it's just about average. So it's about the same as if you look back up here at this slide, you've got your risk adjusted rate here, 0.87. So this is good. It's less than the STS rate. You're doing pretty good. You're doing better than your region. You're doing better than your light group. It's a really simple way of analyzing it. And we don't have a ton of time to just get right down into it. But I find if you just kind of remember those simple little concepts, that helps you. So we're going to go into the QVIA site here in a minute, and I'm not an expert at it. I'm learning just like you guys are, because I did the old way for so long that it's hard to learn the new way, but I am getting better at it. So what I did here is this helps, this visualization helps me. So when you get into your operational report, quality ratings, well, what does that mean? Well, that's your star ratings and your scores. That's what you're going to find under quality ratings. But a lot of people want to see their star ratings. Drill down reports. Okay, so this is your quality rating details. That's basically you're drilling down. So you'll be able to drill down on why you got those quality ratings. And then you have your rating trends. That's kind of trends over time. I'll show you. And then we're going to get into this a little bit more. And then NQF measures. So your NQF reporting is your NQF measures. Okay. So this, in my mind, this just helps me organize my thoughts better if I know what's in each one of these sections. So let's talk a little bit about star ratings first. So you can get 1 to 3 stars on particular overall, and then break down on particular metrics. I will tell you it's really, really hard to get 3 stars. And it has to do with statistics, which is definitely not my forte. But just remember, it's very few people get 3 stars overall. Most people are 2-star participants. Even 2-star participants will have some areas that are 3 stars. For example, their discharge meds might be 3 stars, but their overall is 2 stars. And then you have 1 stars. So again, very hard to get 3 stars. Most people are 2 stars, and some people are 1 stars. Now, the thing I want to point out so that everybody knows, especially for the new data managers, is that star ratings come out twice a year on your harvest reports. And in order to get a star report, a star rating, several years ago, we implemented a kind of a hard stop, really. So, and it has to do with mortality missingness. So if your mortality is missing more than 2%, then you are not going to get a star rating. So if you're putting your data in, you're getting ready to submit your data for like 2020, and you run a report, you look at your IQVIA report, you submit it, and it says your missing mortality fields are 4%. Well, you're not going to get a star rating until you get that down to less than 2%. So it's extremely important that you know that, especially new people, because hospital administrators get just a little upset when they don't get their star ratings. So I wanted to point that out. It's very important so that you know what happened to your patient. And unknown, if you answer unknown, it's the same as answering, it's basically the same as leaving it blank, okay? So there's got to be a yes or a no there. You've got to have an answer. Was this patient alive, or was he dead? So it's extremely important to follow that and to know that it affects your star ratings. Okay, so what does it look like in here? So here's the quality ratings. Here's what your stars look like here. So you'll see that this person overall, and we'll go through this in a minute, overall got a 3-star. Whoa, they're doing great. Overall rating of 3 stars. This is a top-notch program. And then you'll see how it's broke down into each one of these little other areas where each of these little, I call them child areas, get stars too. So here's your participant score. For your overall is 97.55. Here's your confidence interval here. And then you can see the minimum scores for STS, the 10th percentile, the 50th, 90th percentile. So overall, this one looks great. 3 stars. Your administrators can be really happy. Now, if you want to break down into that and drill down a little further, you go into that quality rating details we talked about, and it will show you like mortality. We had 7 of them. So you click on that little number 7 and it'll tell you who those people are, and you can drill down any morbidities. It's going to you can drill down into these particular detail lines and find out who these people were. IMA failures, you had 2. So we're going to go through that a little bit. I just want to point out some things that you can do here. The rating trends, again, I said this is trends over time. So you can see that, in 2019, you were only a 2-star program, but now you're a 3-star program. So you've made some improvement in QF measures. So this is stuff like pre-op beta blocker, use of the IMA, discharge antiplatelet medication. And you can see what your score is, the participant and the STS score. And you can see how you rate with the STS. So like pre-op beta blocker, 91, STS is 96. Maybe you need some improvement in that area. Looks like it, just a little bit of improvement. But again, here your discharge antiplatelet, you're at 100. Well, you can't get any better than that. So, but pre-op beta blocker probably needs a little work. So what I want to do now, and this is the IQVIA library. It has wonderful stuff in it. And we're gonna get ready to get into IQVIA here in a minute, and I'll show you what I do know of it. There was actually, I can't remember her name, Carol, the young lady from Michigan that gave that wonderful presentation a couple of weeks ago about navigating the IQVIA site.
Annie.
Annie?
Yep,
Annie. Okay, I thought it was Annie. And so that was 2 weeks ago, wasn't it, on our webinar?
Yeah, and it's posted online on the webinar page.
Yeah, so for you guys who didn't see that, it was a great presentation about navigating IQVIA, and I I thought it was extremely helpful. So
post-
if you're
I'll
having
post
trouble
it.
with that, yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Carol.
Mhm.
Okay, so, all right, so let's actually go into this a little bit, and I want to go into a few more documents and just show you a couple of other things. I know I'm running out of time, but still got a few more minutes here. So, there's a lot to talk about.
You're doing great, Melinda.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Yeah,
so
it's a
let's
lot of
go
info.
to, there's a lot of info. Okay, let's go into this. Okay, so when you first sign into IQVIA, you got notification page, and this is a dummy one, so it's not really a site. So when I sign into my site, it actually shows this, plus it shows the platform where you can send in your harvests and stuff like that. But so this is notifications, really important here. We talked a little bit about, let's go to the library first. I love the library. Okay, so there's some really good stuff. So this is this national overview. Okay, I want to show you this because it's good. It's good stuff. If you don't have this downloaded, you should, because I use it all the time. So this is what I was telling you about. It gives you harvest information, what comes out in each harvest. Okay, so you can see when you have your star ratings come out. It gives you isolated procedures. Okay, it talks about patient populations. I'm trying not to scroll too much. It talks about like groups. Okay, so you'll know what a like group is. It talks about regions. So for example, if you are in Maine, you're in the New England region. And so when they compare you in your region, they're comparing you with Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont. Okay. It talks about missing data, which we talked about. It's got some really great information in it, and I wanted to show you where it was and tell you how important it is to download it and keep it at hand. It shows you what risk models we have, risk model endpoints. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but this is a great document. Here's your variables. Okay. Missing handling data, we talked about that already. So just wanted to show you this. It's a really great tool without getting too far into it. But it also it talks about odds ratios, OE ratios. This is kind of like a really great thing to understand and have in your own little personal library for STS. The other great things that are on here, it talks about, you've got an end of the harvest checklist. You've got your errors and warnings updated. You've got things to do with the missing variable report. So this, if you're not familiar with this library, some really, really good stuff in here. You've got harvest opt-out forms here. You've got uploader instructions here. So very good information in the library. Now, if you go into your operational reports, again, this is your missing variable report. And I know Carol's talked about this a lot on the last couple of calls, but I always alphabetize my missing variable report, and things that I don't care if they're missing or I know they're going to be missing, because for example, let's say we never do a hemoglobin introp. So we just do crits or something. You know that, you get rid of those. just kind of ignore them. So you can quickly go through. I pretty much quickly go through the missing variable report and focus in on the stuff that, hey, this shouldn't be missing. I need to fix that, as opposed to, oh yeah, that's missing all the time, or I don't really care if that's missing, or yeah, that probably, you know. So you can quickly go through it. The harvest summary report, we'll just look at that one of those. I don't know what's going to pull up. We'll see. Well, hopefully this won't be too. Okay, let's just pick up. Let's go.
And I'll post that webinar, Melinda, that we did in August about harvest closing.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's just run this and see what comes up, what it looks like. So when you pull this up, oh, you can see this is a beautiful one because this is a dummy field. But anyway, you have a circle here, and blue is warnings, and then red are these critical alerts that you have to fix. So of course, I'll look at my outstanding warnings, but most of the time it's just that out of the usual range stuff for things I've entered, which I don't really worry too much about that unless it's something crazy. I'll glance at it. But the critical alerts, like if I had a big pie piece of red here, then I'd be in trouble. I need to definitely go and fix that. That's kind of harvest summary report. This is the part that always gets me. I hope I go back. Yeah, finally went back. Okay. Dashboard. This is your kind of ongoing non-analyzed dashboard. This is the risk adjusted dashboard. Okay. So this is where your star ratings and things like that are going to be. This is the risk adjusted dashboard from the analyzed harvest data results. Risk match score. You always want to look at this when you're doing your harvest, because let's just pull it up and show you what it looks like. But you want to look at it because oh, I wonder if it'll let me do this, because maybe it will. Yeah. So it's giving you how close you and your vendor, how close the STS basically and the IQV and the vendor are matching. Is basically what it's telling you. So if you come in here and you see there is, let's say something's only 80%, then there might be something wrong on the vendor end, okay? That maybe, you know, or something. So you want to try to check that out and find out why it's not matching, because it really should be matching. So I always look at these. I always do look at the risk score matches just to see if they're close. And you can see these records match. Okay. So do look at that. Just don't not look at it. It is important to look at when you're doing your harvest. Okay. So what else in here? Again, let's go to look at this really quick. A few minutes, then we'll stop for questions. We're almost done. Oh, that's probably too long. Oh well, maybe it'll come up really quick. Here it comes.
Yeah, it said I was on mute. I said it's thinking about it.
Yeah, okay. So this is a slide I showed you. So remember, quality ratings is your star ratings, and your scores right over here. And then you got your rating details. So that's basically your drill downs. Rating trends over time. Here's your NQF measures. Then you've got your risk adjusted and regional outcomes, your benchmark reports, and your anesthesia report here too. So some really good information in here. And like I said, there's really good, some good videos under Data Manager Resources to help you navigate this site. And I think that I learn something every month when we're talking about this on the user calls when we're talking about this. It seems like I learn a tip every month about this because it's new for me too. So I'm going to go and get back to those slides, and we're just about done here. This one's it. So again, the library is wonderful. So just some housekeeping tips, and then we'll have some time for questions. So it's important to keep your data collection forms and or your collection notes. Some people don't use forms; they just use little notes for at least 4 years in case you get audited. It's nice to have, especially sometimes you may find something in a certain place in a chart, especially like you're going to get audited. You get the letter, oh, you're going to be audited, and you've got 50 names on there. And what I did, the first thing I did was pull my data collection forms on those patients and see if I had made a note that I got information from any other part of the chart that, outside of this particular record, because you need to send that kind of information to the auditor. So keep your stuff for about 4 years, make yourself some notes, especially if you're getting stuff in different parts of the chart. If you, we talked about this, the IMA, the other acceptable reason for not using an IMA in version 4.2. If you get another acceptable reason, please keep that email. You might print it out and attach it to the data collection form in case you get audited, because that is going to be an audit element for version 4.2. It's important that you keep some sort of log. It doesn't have to be formal. It's just however you decide to do it, of your mortality checks, your 30-day readmission checks, your 30-day infection checks, how you're doing that. Where did you find it at? For example, you could say, it could be as simple as something stapled to your data collection form. I called the patient, or I called the doctor, went to the surgeon's office on this day, and there's been no infection and there's been no readmit and the patient's alive. I mean, it can be really simple. It just has to be some sort of method of tracking. Not too formal, not too elaborate. Okay, so resources again. You've got the webpage, you've got IQVIA support, you've got the national database, and then of course you have Carol. I always like to get her email out.
Thanks, Melinda. Thanks.
So we all know Carol's email, and she loves getting email. Anyway, but and then you have the database operational questions, which usually end up with Jane or Addie or Sydney or somebody like that. So anyway, thank you for your time. I don't know if we have any questions or not, so we could go over. I hope this was helpful. It's a lot of information.
Great job, Melinda. It was really helpful. I answered a couple questions in they're already in the answered column, but we can go through these questions that we have 15 in here now. Go through these, and if we have time, we can verbally go over the ones that we already answered.
Okay, so
first one, I'll read them to you.
Okay.
What is the difference between monthly webinars and user group calls?
Well, monthly webinars tend to be more education focused, and user group calls tend to be more database, like IQVIA issues. Like we always have Melanie and her team on there. So issues that you might be having with the IQVIA site, or the way the data has been displayed, or things of that nature. So it's more like a user group as opposed to an educational type call.
Great. Okay, next question is from Pamela. She was asking if the ICD-10 codes are part of the risk.
No.
We don't use those for risk assessment.
In fact, they're optional to enter. For you guys, you don't have to enter those in the database. Those are optional fields.
Yeah. from Sylvia, is there an area that identifies best practice, such as best practice to prevent stroke, etc.?
Well, we could probably go to the website and see if, they've got those practice statements there. Let's see what we got out there okay, let me make sure I'm going to the right place. sts.org. Can you guys see that?
Yes, ma'am.
So we've got some clinical practice guidelines here. I'm not sure exactly what's under here. Let's look for sure. Oh, there's an app. That's kind of cool. And we've got antibiotics. We've got blood management, AFib. So those are some nice things there. We also have, it looks like, some expert consensus statements. Let's see what we got under here. Some interesting stuff here. And now it for under here, publications. Of course, got the annuals of thoracic surgery. I'll tell you, the best thing I do, what I usually do, Sylvia, is I'll search the STS site, but then I love Google. I'll go out there and search the internet and find out best practices for a particular patient population. There's a lot of great articles out there.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, I'm not sure if this question was supposed to be ignored or not, but I think when we were talking about PROC ID chart, this came in about what if a case is emergent preoperatively? Melinda, you always make me yawn.
Well, emergent has nothing to do with, it has something to do with the risk chart. If they're emergent, then they're going to be weighted a higher risk. Is that what we're asking?
Yeah, so the status of like a scheduled procedure, emergent, or salvage is not used in determining if a case stays in analyzed procedures. We look at that as an increased risk if the patients are emergent or emergent salvage. The only group where the status of a patient would remove it from a measure is the internal mammary measure, and we remove emergent salvage cases from those measures. So those patients are excluded from the denominator, but for purposes of if a case is emergent or emergent salvage, those increase the risk of the patients and they're taken into account with the risk models.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I get a lot of questions about that. For deep sternal wound within 90 days, it's answered with unknown. Is that a problem? No, that's not a problem because it's an instruction in the training manual. If you're not going to follow it for 90 days, you're supposed to answer unknown.
Right. Just be consistent. Either answer them on all your patients or don't answer them on all your patients. I think that's in the training manual too, right?
Yes.
Okay. Can you go over to run the report you're talking about?
I wonder what report they're talking. Was that benchmark stuff, I wonder?
I don't know. Is that our friend Anne?
Is this right here? Is this one?
I don't know if she's still on. Let's see.
The last section being reviewed, where do I look at the information or star ratings? Okay, so right here should give you your quality ratings right here. There they are.
Oh yeah, and then if you go up to, I think, either file or visualization, you should be able to print it out. Or
No,
one of
that's the
those.
file.
One of those up there.
Export.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Look at that. Good job, Melinda. Way to navigate that.
Well, that's why I made that slide, because when I first looked at, let me go back to here. This always does this. This is why. Okay, you get to see me run it again. I'm just picking a period. I'm just picking a period. So it was this one.
Could you show again? And then the next question is the last section being reviewed. Where do I locate that information for the star rating? I'm not sure. I think that might have been the national report overview. I don't know.
Maybe. So this is coming up. And so when this page comes up, okay, so quality ratings here, the stars, this is where your stars are. This is where your drill down is for your quality ratings. This is your rating trends right here. This is your NQF reporting. Okay, so if you click into the quality ratings here, you will see your stars. You can then export them. So you'll have a file. Now, for the report that talks about the star ratings, we're going to get out of this and we're going to go to the library. I love the library. And it's this National Report Analysis Overview. And you'll open this up. And I cheat all the time. I guess that's because I'm lazy. I do my F10 and then I find out wherever, the word star is. And it should say, oh, it takes me right down to my star ratings. So it talks about star ratings, okay? And the statistical models for it and all that stuff that is way over my head. 1, 2, 3, I get, but all that statistics, not so much. But that's where you find it in the analysis overview.
Thank you. Can you go back to the risk-adjusted report, tab, back to where you were at in the risk-adjusted reports?
Operational reports here.
Yeah, and then I want to show Mary is saying on the old report, it had all the isolated cabbages together. Do we have to run them separately? And I think there's an export all button. And if I remember correctly, I think IQVIA might be making some updates to the printing functionality of it, but the export all button, if I'm thinking correctly on this, it should print out in a really big PDF file, similar to, the export report button up at the top. Scroll back up in the box.
Scroll back up in the box.
On the right-hand side, there's this arrow right just to the right of your mouse. The little arrow there. Nope.
Arrow. Oh, expand?
No, down below, right, like an inch below that. The little arrow.
Here?
That guy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hit that. Keep going.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
I spent a long afternoon.
That's all right.
I'm getting tired now.
It's all right. It's a lot. I'm trying to move my mouse to show you where it's at. The export report button that will export all of those reports.
Okay, perfect.
And then when you go into each one, the star ratings, you can export those within each of those tabs as well.
Perfect.
And I think IQVIA is working on some more functionality to make it print a little bit nicer because there are duplicates or missing pages or things. Okay, thank you.
So
you're welcome, Mary. Okay, then it says I messed up on, so we were talking about the missingness before, how you were talking about mortality missingness, and I saw the question come across. I think, is your name Anne? I think it's Anne, right? And she says, I had missingness of 5.2% for NQF measures. Right, so NQF measures is another set of measures we have a 5% missingness threshold on. So if you have more than 5% missing, you'll be excluded from analysis on the star ratings as for those as well. And then she asks, how do I run reports so I can fix this? So Melinda's gonna open the missing variable report and she'll show you, a time range. IQVIA is updating the NQF filter on this report, but all of the variables are listed under the all filter, which isn't really a filter if it's all. But on the left-hand side there, you'll see it says all risk-adjusted models, NQF, PROC ID. So under the all report, and this is where, again, you can use that sorting feature. I think you just click in either that one or the row below it. Might be the row below.
Must be the row below it. I'm still trying to get used to this myself, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's the right mouse button. And it might be, try the top row again. What happened to it?
Actually,
the way the sort.
It looks like it's in alphabetical order. Maybe it did it.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it looks like to me it's already in alphabetical order.
Yeah, it does. So I would do the all column and just review this to make sure you're not missing. Like this site, it looks like they're missing appropriate antibiotic discontinuation is not coded on all of their cases for this time period. So they probably need to, and that might just be 1 or 2 cases. They probably need to go back in and update that. Yeah, it's just
numerator 1 of 1.
Yeah, so they're probably just
and this is a dummy site, so it's not a
great. Oh yeah, so it's
site.
just showing you, just giving you an example.
Yeah. So you can, but when you find, like, for example, let's say you had something that was in the NQF, like a beta blocker, pre-op beta blocker, and you go in there and you see, and it says, I don't even know if it'll be in here or not, med beta blocker, there it is, within 24 hours. So it's telling you 1 out of 1 case is missing. So it's 100% missing. You need to go fix that. And so if you click on this, it'll drill down as to who's missing what. And that way you can figure out and who was in that 5.2% missing. So you'll figure out which cases you need to correct and then resubmit.
Very good. Thank you, Melinda.
That all the questions? Wow, great.
I think, yeah, that was everything. I think I got them all. And I want to just go through a couple that we received early on. Somebody, our friend Tabitha Lewis Isbell said, "You're always so great about getting back to our questions and very timely. Thank you. It's very helpful." And I agree, Melinda does a great job. Somebody asked about when the PowerPoint will be made available. So usually we try to get these up within a couple days, but it can take up to a week to post the recording and PDF slides onto the STS website under the webinar page. Peter Fleming asked about an algorithm where a participant, hold on one second, where a participant enters the procedure performed on a patient and whether the procedure was planned, unplanned due to complication, unrelated disease, anatomy, and the algorithm determines if it's an analyzed case or not. So all of the vendor software, when they're certified, they're all built with the risk model algorithms. The risk model algorithms includes the PROC ID chart. So that includes determining what kind of, if the case is going to be analyzed or not. And that will, if the case is going to be analyzed, your vendor software will provide you with a risk of that patient, same as the risk model calculator that's available on the STS website. Sarah said that it was great information and she'll finish watching it later. And I think that was all of them then. We got through all, 2 more. Oh, Pat Hobbs says, thank you very much. And I think her name is Anne. Is that right, Melinda?
I'm not sure, honestly. I think it is Anne.
With Anne.
She's raising her hand.
I think she's raising her hand. I'm going to unmute her. Okay. Are you there?
Yes, it is Anne.
Woohoo! I knew it.
I know I'm a pain. I keep asking the same question, but I'm really trying to figure it out.
You're not a pain. You're not. I'm like, I think it's Anne.
It is Anne.
Your questions help everybody, so it's good that you ask them.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
You too.
Thanks. Okay,
Well,
what else?
Well, I appreciate everybody listening, and I hope this was helpful.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks, Melinda. You did a really great job. Great information. Oh, what sections are optional that you referenced earlier?
Well, there's a lot of optional stuff, like optional cases or optional ICD-9s. I said were optional. There's some procedures that are optional. I'm not sure,
Yeah.
Melissa. You want to raise your hand? I don't know what she's talking about.
Or you can send it into Melinda at moffer@sts.org.
She's giving my email out. Oh, for Pete's sake.
Melissa, if you want to, I can unmute you if you want. Let's see if I can find you here. Maybe we can answer your question. Hold on one second. There we go. Oh, are you there, Melissa?
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I was just, I use the direct data entry for IQVIA, and so it's hard to differentiate what's optional and not. So I'm just trying to follow what, if we're over putting, what we really need that's required, or if we just need to put in everything.
Well,
are you talking about specific types of cases, or are you talking about fields for
fields and IQVIA?
Fields. So she's talking about fields. So really, CPT codes are optional. Okay, that's what I was talking about. You don't have to put those in the database, not unless your surgeon just absolutely, or somebody wants them in there. All the other fields should be answered. I have seen sites that don't answer all questions. I'm not advocating that.
Well, I think I can clarify on that one. So STS wants all of the data, and your contracts with STS say that that the sites are going to submit complete data, which means all of the fields relevant to that patient that are able to be abstracted should be abstracted.
Right. If you can't abstract it, you don't have an answer, then of course you're going to leave it blank. But if you can abstract it, you should enter the answer into the database. But it's not like NCDR. For those of you who are on NCDR and there's a specific threshold, like you have to enter 90% of such and such, or you won't be able to harvest. There's no threshold levels like that set up for fields. So we're a little different in that respect.
Yeah, if you have a specific case you want Melinda or myself to look at, we'd be happy to do that for you. Okay.
All right. Well, it's about the top of the hour and my voice is about gone, but I appreciate everybody's attendance.
Great job. Great job, Melinda. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody, thank you so much for joining today, and look forward to seeing you at AQO. I think is that our next one that's coming up here? Let's see. Oh, I know. That's right. We have a tentative monthly webinar scheduled on October 6th. More information to come if that will take place or not. And then we have AQO on Thursday, October 14th for adult cardiac. But with registration, you're granted access to all of the days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday for AQO. So hopefully, if I don't get pulled into jury duty, then we'll see each other on the 6th. But otherwise, you'll see Melinda on the 14th.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Melinda.
Okay.
My long-winded answer. Bye, everybody.
Bye.